Hey, all you Arizona lovers. This is the Finding Arizona podcast, episode number 382. I'm your host. Thank you so much for listening and watching. I forgot to say, I'm your host, Jose. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been watching these episodes. We're close to 400. Today's episode is 382 with TeamLeadr and with Clay behind the guy which made this wonderful business come to life. And I just want to say thank you to Clay for, just coming in, being real laid back and just really comfortable to talk to. We're going to be talking a lot about leadership and about how a business works with having an inspiration behind it, having some motivation in your employees, in what you're looking and striving for. So that being said, I just want to get into a little bit of the business side. You can catch up with every person who comes in through our doors in the links below. We always try and connect you guys with every single individual. So go check out TeamLeadr. I also want to say you can catch every episode of our podcast at findingarizonapodcast.com. We make it easy for you guys to connect with us through social media. And if you want to go ahead and send us a direct line, you can go ahead and send an email over at findingarizonapodcast@gmail.com. All the social medias are under Finding Arizona Podcast. That's every single one: Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever you want to do, you can go ahead and find us there. And I hope you guys are encouraged to check out our YouTube page, which has a personal vlog of our family that you can catch up with our little guy, who is our co-producer or co-host, or however you want to put it. He is in everything that we try and do around the house, around this business that we call our podcast. He is a very big, vital part of that. So we hope you guys are encouraged to stay connected with us through that. But on top of which, Brittany just put out a new blog post about her time over in California. She went to go see the Chicago Bears and Chargers last couple weeks ago, and I hope you guys are encouraged to check it out because she's really good at these blog posts. But I also just want to say it just kind of really shows you what we do on a kind of weekly basis, or kind of like a personal connection to you guys, because we want you guys to feel like you're a part of our team, a part of our family, and we put those out so that you guys can feel connected and stay in touch with us. We're real big football fans over here. We hope that you guys are also just wanting to share with those moments in us, those special occasions. She got to go see family. She got to go hang out with her dad. And those connecting points are very vital and very important to the both of us. So I hope you guys stay connected with us through those blog posts and through the vlogs that is available on YouTube. You could also catch the episodes of the podcast on the YouTube page as well. So that being said, let's just jump right into it. Episode number 382 with Clay Hall of TeamLeadr. As always, kisses, hugs, and belly rubs. We will see you next one.
All right, well, then listen. It's time for the fourth quarter. This is our quarter. We need you on your feet right now. We need you loud right
All right, awesome. Welcome back, everybody, to the Finding Arizona podcast. I'm your host, Jose. As always, we bring in fantastic guests every week, and today's no different. This is Clay, by the way. I'm just letting you guys know right off the hand. And if you take a look on their table here, he has a bottle called TeamLeadr, and that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit today.
Absolutely, love that.
And then I'll ask you we'll just start off because we had a wonderful conversation prior to recording, but I'd love to just get your origin story and how this came up upon your table. But you've got a lot of hats that you wear too as well. So give everyone your origin story.
Oh man, how much time do we have here?
We have plenty of time. I promise.
No, yeah. So I've been in Arizona my entire life. I'm 35 years old, and all 35 of them have been here as an Arizona native.
Nice.
Yeah, I grew up in Tucson, so spent 21 of those years down there.
Yeah.
All my family lives down there. Both my sets of grandparents lived in that area as well too. So definitely Arizona roots are really strong.
Nice.
Yeah. In college, I actually never intended to leave. I was a firefighter down in Tucson, which I love to do, by the way. And I was playing volleyball, which I played sports my entire life as well too.
Yeah.
And I got recruited by Grand Canyon University.
Cool.
To come play volleyball for them. The coach met me at a tournament and said, "Hey, you should come talk." So I was like, sure. And of course, like most people, I'd been in Arizona my entire life, and I thought Grand Canyon was near the Grand Canyon or near Flagstaff. So I was a little bit surprised to learn that it was in the West Valley. I don't think I've ever told anybody that. And so I guess I just come out here in public and say that as Arizona native, I thought GCU was not in Phoenix.
Like Northern Flagstaff.
Yeah, Northern Flagstaff, exactly. So, but nonetheless, super happy to come up here. And I moved up here in my 21st year and, and eventually met my wife, who's from Scottsdale as well too. Spent almost all of her life. I think she moved here when she was 3.
Wow.
So met her, we started dating, and of course the rest is history, as they say. So I've been here in the Valley since then.
Oh, awesome. So there's a lot to pull back there, because one being that, there's not many natives of the state that we get to meet here in the podcast form. But that's one thing that I always find interesting, because your roots are so dedicated to this area. So I'd love to just pick back just a little bit. Were your grandparents, like, did they give you a little bit of the history of like where they kind of originated, or were they also just like pioneers to the state?
Yeah, no, they were actually from here as well too. It's crazy. Yeah, I've got three generations of Arizona natives in my family.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so lots of history here. Absolutely.
Man, I'm surprised, because we met a 5-generation person, from the Mesa area, and so her great-great-grandfather started one of the first businesses out there in Mesa.
Very cool.
And he has a statue out there.
No way, really?
Just like, you have something.
I'm sure there is.
A lot of like history saved up in the household.
Oh my gosh, so many. I mean, I saw a picture of my grandpa who actually was born in Tempe.
Oh,
and I saw a picture of him as a kid with his siblings. And it's literally exactly where Mills, like downtown Mill is. And it's the middle of a field. You would think you're out in, Santan Valley. Well, of course, that's all built out now too. But yeah, it's just wild how far this valley and the state has come in the last, just couple generations.
Wow, absolutely. That's incredible, because that's the kind of thing I'm so interested in, just seeing the growth of how the city grew, and not only the city, but the state as well. Because again, if you pull back the curtains on a lot of the history, I mean, Phoenix wasn't just the state capital at one point. It was Tucson then Florence, and then back to Tucson, now the Phoenix and stuff like that. And so there's definitely a change and growth happening. And so there's definitely like family history that I would love to like partake in too. Is like, what we like to go to different areas of this, the Valley. And so Chandler in particular grew in from, just that hotel area.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
It's just like so amazing to find out. But we're going to move forward just a little bit in your roots and just kind of go to that conversation that you had with that volleyball coach. And just like, I'd love to just like, what made you say yes to GCU, and what made you feel like you belong there?
Yeah, I didn't know until I got there. It was one of those things where as a lot of people are, well, I guess some people are, I love to just find new paths, explore new things, and just do new stuff. I've always been adventurous that way. My mom always said, I'm the first person who just jumped in head first and asked questions later type of thing. Yeah. So I actually I committed to going to GCU to play before I even told my parents or anybody else, so I had to go backtrack and say, hey, actually, coach, let me go make sure, because I was 17 at the time. So make sure my parents are on board with this as well too. So so it was one of those things where I just said yes to the opportunity, and I don't regret it, for a second, because it's led to so many, other great paths and ventures, in the last, 15 years or so.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my research being part of this one aspect of what I do here is like, you've got a very like eclectic amount of degrees, from MBA to PhD.
I know.
What would you say is probably one of your like proudest moments education wise? And then give us a little bit of like, what was it like to walk away with that PhD? Because I need to know that.
It's a lot. So I know my wife just still rolls her head, because she knows. She literally said it when I finished my PhD. I was like, I'm done now. She's like, no, you're not. I'm like, no, I'm literally done. She's like, no, you're not. And so we'll find out. But anyway, it's one of those things where like, I just love learning. Like I'm just one of those people who I'm just always curious. Like, some people, like to disconnect and things like that from their technology, which I do as well too. But the one thing I love about having a cell phone is that I get to ask Google a question anytime about anything. And I'm one of those people like, I don't know, let's learn more about whatever it may be, or how the infrastructure of the canal system works in Phoenix. And I just one of those people who just always want to know everything I possibly can. Absolutely. So the education piece for me is less about, titles and letters behind my name and more about just the true like joy and spirit of just learning something you didn't know the day before. There's just something about going to bed at night for me and just feeling like I improved some way, both in myself and in someone else too. So that's the kind of thing that I love. To answer your question, probably, honestly, my very first degree was my most proudest, which is actually an associate's degree in fire science.
Nice.
And really, it was because I was the person in school. And, you know, again, if my mom ever listened to this podcast, she'll probably chuckle about it because I was a person who did not give 2 seconds about school. I was all about school, was all about sports, you know, friends, everything else in between. And school and education was on the very bottom of that list.
Yeah.
So when I left high school, the only reason why I kept going to school was because I had to do that to be eligible to play volleyball.
Okay.
So that was basically the only motivator. So, you know, over time, I really, as I probably matured a little bit, to be honest, I probably learned there is some value in that as well too. And it actually worked harder for my first associate's degree than any other degree I did. So as soon as I finished that first degree, it was one of those things where like, oh, I can do this and this isn't hard. And actually I kind of enjoyed it. So let's see what's next. And it kind of just snowballed from there.
That's so cool. I mean, in all honesty too, that's kind of the big reason why I chose to, you know, go and get my master's degree. It's just the fact that like, I felt like I didn't learn it at all, right? Yeah. Like all the things that I could have learned from the degree that I got. And so I was like, I'm going to try it again. Like I'm going to, you know, if there's an opportunity to work, then there's an opportunity to work.
Totally.
But I definitely want to try this, like, you know, try to get another higher, you know, piece of degree or whatever education. And so for me, it was like, man, I went into school. I love learning. And just the fact that I could not only cell phone, but also like the library being so specific to what my, I'm a landscape architect. So I went to landscape school and design school. The design library was so, you know, integrated with just things of design world that I just get lost in like all of that stuff and all of the books that were provided to us. So, let me go ahead and now, like, cause I want to ask you about, there's a lot of things that you learned about. I mean, when I look you up, there's a lot of things about leadership and a lot of things about that kind of category. You being a firefighter, I can imagine that leadership is a little bit having to do with that part. And that was the get-go beginning of kind of learning the aspects of leadership. Not only volleyball too, I imagine like a team sport as well. But can you give us some more like reasons why the leadership aspect kind of follows you throughout your career and follows you through everything? Sure.
It's one of those things where, and you probably have similar stories, maybe with landscape architecture, like you don't really learn, you know, or at least for me, I didn't really learn or wasn't aware of like what my skills were until I got a little bit older and start to look back and do a little bit of reflection and realize like, you know, I've always had a more of a leadership mentality and trait. And as I got older, I was kind of like, you know, I was always the captain of every sports team I was ever on. And it wasn't because I was the best player. It was just because my teammates felt like I was the best person to bring them together and lead them, you know, in group projects and things like that. I was always voted to be the one person who stands up in front of the class and gives the presentation for the group and those kind of things. And I just like look back and it's just funny how organically those things kind of like poke through and you don't realize it in the time. But then when you look back, you're like, oh, maybe this is something I've just, you know, have a natural ability for. And of course, you know, work through academics and other things to do. So for me, like leadership has always just been one of those things where I just gravitate to it. There's just something about leading and finding a group of people or even a person and just finding a way to make them a better person, a better individual, a better human. Honestly, there's just something so rewarding and so inquisitive about that for me that I love it. And that's truly what I focus on every day when I go to work is just how do I promote somebody a little bit more and make them just a little bit better than they were when they woke up.
That sounds like a great mentality. Also just a great vibe to have around you.
Totally. Yeah.
So then now let's get into a little bit more of your business portions of it. And, you know, what you're here to actually kind of talk about, what we kind of had you on the show for. Give us a little bit of how this came across your table or how it kind of developed into you being, you know, part of this squad.
Yeah, absolutely. So it, by a lot of great companies and great ventures, it started kind of by accident and just, you know, it happened before I even knew it was happening. Back when I was doing my PhD, I had a project that was basically assessing learning styles and like a corporate development for the sake of, you know, leadership development. So I was looking at a bunch of different methodologies of how, you know, corporate companies can train leaders. So I was working through that project. And as I kept doing research, there was something about like everything that I found and all the standard like norms, if you will, that just didn't really resonate. Like we're doing as a, you know, a culture, we're doing a great job developing our people and developing, you know, just humans in general.
Yeah.
So with that, I literally have the Post-it note now. I literally just wrote down, find a way to do better.
Yeah.
It was just like chicken scratcher in the middle of researching some stuff. And I just grabbed a yellow Post-it note and I wrote, find a way to do better. And I slapped it on my computer.
Nice.
And for me, Post-it notes are like the bane of my existence in a good way. So if I need to get something done, I put it on a Post-it note because it annoys me so much looking at that around my computer monitor that I have to complete that task so I can get rid of it.
Makes
so
sense.
for me, Post-it notes are better than anything else.
Yeah.
So that Post-it note was there for, and this was in 2019.
Okay.
So that Post-it note was there for like almost, 3 years before I officially started something. And every once in a while I would just look at that Post-it note. I think about it for a little bit. I'd go to sleep. I'd dream about it. I'd take another note, or I'd do a little Google search and I'd forget about it. And then I'd go on with my life and come back to it. But that's always stuck with me, that Post-it note. And I still have it today. It's not sticky anymore, but it's still there.
It's still
there.
You, yeah.
And that was kind of the inspiration for, we have to do better just from a corporate setting. It really is, and just businesses in general have to do better to develop people.
Yes.
And what really, really drove it home for me, which is part of that project that I was working on, which I think I got like a B, by the way. It wasn't even my best work, honestly. In the long term, it ended up being okay, but yeah, it wasn't my best work. But one of the part of that project was I reviewed a LinkedIn article that was like basically a big study, and they interviewed 100,000 people on LinkedIn and basically asked them out of all the things in the world your company could give you, what's the number one thing that you want from your company? And the number one answer, surprising to me, it was like 90-something% of the respondents said that they want to be invested and developed in.
Okay.
Above compensation, right? I mean, everyone thinks money, right? That's why we're all working, is just to make a paycheck. But that's what people want. They want to be invested in. They want to feel like they're a part of something, and they want to grow.
Yeah.
So to me, I found that there's a lot of opportunity there, and it's almost like the whole the product market fit, is what I'm trying to build, something that the product wants or that the community wants, and clearly it is, right? Yeah. So that was basically the catalyst of what is now officially TeamLeadr. And again, it was kind of by accident, like I said. I was doing all the things that TeamLeadr is and what it encompasses. I just was doing it in a personal, way off my cuff, essentially.
Nice. And what was that first kind of, I guess, your first client, or what that first conversation to allow yourself to be allowed into the doors, as they say, to make your effect start to come true, make your business start to flourish? Yeah,
no, that's a great question. Luckily, I have some great people in my life and some great mentors. Actually, one was a former CEO where I was actually an executive at in the past.
Okay.
And I talked to him more as a mentor. He's been a great person across, for several years. And I just brought this to him and I said, this is just something I can't get out of my head. I don't know what I need to do differently to help people grow and give them, what that LinkedIn study and what I observed said, but I don't know what it is.
Okay.
And I just didn't know. So I went to him more just hey, tell me about what you think what might work as a CEO, and a business owner. And that was basically when he said, listen, you've got something here, first of all, work on this, develop it. Here's my notes. Here's what I think as a CEO I would want to hear, and things like that. Yeah. And that's where it started. And he was actually the first client. So he allowed me to come in as a developmental partner with him and his employees. Nice. And actually was my first partner. So he was really a great asset to be able to turn this into something that, is functional and usable in the workplace setting. Very cool. And, the whole spirit of what I try to do, not even just in TeamLeadr, but just me as a leader, and really all leaders should do, is really kind of peel back the layers of not, I'm looking at a person or an employee or anything like that. It's kind of like what I said before, how can we just make this person be, a better human? And again, go to bed tonight better than they woke up in the morning. Yeah. The most feedback that I'll ever be proud of is one that I got actually from a former learner. It was a text from her, and she sent me a text, and it was a screenshot that just, it was from her husband, which I found out. His name was Phil. Yeah. But the text just said, something along the lines of, hey, our argument last night was probably the best argument we ever had. And I was like, oh, that's a weird screenshot for a student to send me or whatever. Yeah. But as I peeled it back and was like, what's going on here? Explain the context a little bit. She's like, what I did last night when my husband and I had an argument about something I don't even recall. But she's like, I literally took the principles in one of your trainings about conflict management with your employee and applied it to my argument with my husband. And he was dumbfounded because he was like, wow, usually we escalate and it's whoever can yell the loudest wins the argument and we kind of lose all conversation. She's like, I took some of your principles, I used some of your methods, and it was amazing. It worked.
Okay.
So that was kind of the moment when I was like, it's not just about, employees and corporations and those kinds of things. Again, it's about just helping people be better people.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
I love that. So again, it's like one of those aspects of like, we talk to a lot of different businesses and entrepreneurs and just kind of like reflecting on their history and reflecting on who they are. And it's just one of those things of like, I love kind of peeling back the layers of like the individual and say, hey, look, or, do you think that your lineage or who you are is like a testament to what you are now? Or do you think you bumped into this? Like, where do you think you like stand upon, like, as you look back at the history, it's like, do you think this was something that you just picked up snowball effect? Or do you think it's something that comes from a long line of others who were like a big guidance on it? I feel like with you, it's like a kind of both stories.
Probably both. Yeah. I think, I've had a lot of great influential people, including, my parents and others like that too. But like I said, there's always been something in me that I look back that I've always just gravitated and had a knack for it. It's, like you with landscape design, my wife's an interior designer.
Nice.
She'll walk into a room and look at an accent wall that's olive covered and say, that wall should be one shade darker so it brings out the bronze hue of the frame and really makes that pop. And that's like 9 miles over my head,
Yeah.
For me, I look at people and, I immediately say like, okay, I'm going to talk to, you, Jose, later about, the way that you can use hand gestures in your presentation to make that more engaging with the people that you're talking to.
Nice.
Like that's the way my brain just goes naturally.
Absolutely.
So I think it's probably a combination of both. And it's just learning to use your strengths and of course use your passions. And that's why you can hear it in my voice. Like that's why I just love what I do here, because I'm so passionate about this.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, I've been blessed to have the success I've had.
Yeah. And I just, in all honesty, it comes through as, you as an individual too. It's like, I've always been kind of the guy who's like, oh man, I don't know when it comes to these, people who come in through our doors, like, I can't relate.
Yeah,
I'm just a normal guy. And so, when it comes to having these conversations, I always try and ask myself, like, what would I like to learn from this person, in the sense that, I'm not a master at what you do. I'm definitely just a learner, and I just love hearing these different components. So one of the things that I always try and ask someone is, what happened during the pandemic? So I'm just kind of like, it's a couple years from it happening. It affected everyone on all sorts of shapes and sizes. You can ask and you probably witnessed it from the corporate standpoint.
Absolutely.
But, from where you stood and how it affected you as an individual, I can imagine that, having this corporate life or using corporate life to help facilitate what you do for a living, it made a big effect on you, because I can imagine it was critical for the corporate world to kind of look inward and kind of ask themselves, what do we provide as a company or as, what we do to facilitate our services? And that's what we've learned on our episodes, just from the entrepreneurial standpoint of like individual solo, that they had to look inward. They had to ask themselves, what do we provide to our community, and how can we manage to stay afloat through that bread and butter, as I like to call it.
That's a good way to learn it. Yeah, that's right. There are so many things that are running through my head that I could touch on with that question, but I'll keep it concise. So there's two thoughts. Is one related to the pandemic and kind of what I do is there's a whole kind of modular section in my learning that's all dedicated to hybrid and remote management of people, basically. And as you can imagine, that came straight from COVID. That was not an original, kind of content, but to your point, everyone had to learn how to adapt and overcome basically during COVID. So, I really had to understand that from the leadership perspective, people, that wasn't a very well trained or learned skill set for leaders to learn how to manage somebody over a Zoom link that lives, in another state and they've never met and they've been working for them for a year. So I have a lot of training on that as well too, which I think is so critical, because I don't think remote or hybrid work's going anywhere as from what we've seen. So that's one part. Again, adapt and overcome is the biggest piece. I had to quickly modify and make sure that I'm giving people what they need, and that piece of it. The other part of it is the you're absolutely right, from the corporate side. So during the pandemic, I was actually the CEO of a physician practice during that time. So for one side of it, becoming the part where you have to just become a recruiter, honestly, and just try to retain people, because that was a time where people weren't working, didn't want to come into work, couldn't work. It was just a really weird side of things from the workforce perspective. We've never been more desperate for just, people in general, let alone even great people, honestly. So that piece of it made, I think, myself as a, corporate executive and just, corporations in general, really look in the mirror and say exactly what you said. Like, what can we do different as an entity or as an organization to make, our workplace a place where people can come and want to come?
Yeah.
Because not only from the competitive aspect, but just, how do we get people to come in and actually stay here?
Yeah.
And that was a big piece of it, a big catalyst to answer your question about TeamLeadr. I was still kind of more doing research and development during that phase and getting all my ducks in a row, essentially.
Yeah.
And that was a piece that I really thought, okay, this is something that actually needs to happen and needs to happen sooner than I thought, because for a company to recruit and retain people, you have to give them what you want. I go back to that, LinkedIn study, and what they want is to be developed and invested in.
Yeah.
So that was basically the initial mantra, if you will, for TeamLeadr. And like I said before, I started just doing this stuff on my own. It was before that was ever an LLC or anything like that. I started using these methods and just saying to my employees, let me, invest and pour into you, not for my own personal gain, but just because I know that this is what you want and you need. Mm-hmm. So let me figure out how I can, best support you and grow you as a person, as an employee. So that was kind of the COVID nutshell, was really just focusing on employees. And I really, really hope as, an industry, we don't get away from that. Yeah. COVID, knock on wood, is in theory, kind of in the rearview mirror to a certain degree. I just hope that we really, really don't revert back to the, the corporation centric employees. It's a privilege to work for me and work, with me and those kinds of things. Yeah. We have to realize that people, not just employees, but people are our greatest assets, as a workforce. Sure. And that's a mentality that I hope really doesn't go away. And I'm really, really pushing hard, with my platform and my company to make sure that, everyone understands that that's true.
I can definitely attest from being a remote worker myself. Yeah. It's just one of those things of we had, she told me that we were pregnant, and we were just at that point, we were like, man, we had the big conversations of what are some of the things that we want from our our family growing, and then asked ourselves the critical questions how do we go about it? Yeah. And one of the things is just one of us has to be home for him, and one of us has to work from home. And so I took the challenge of letting go of a job that I did have that was a little fairly smaller, that had just wasn't trying, because COVID was happening. And they just was we're small enough that we don't need to leave our offices, and we have enough space that we don't. So they weren't looking to have offline workers. Gotcha. And so I was okay, well, that's not going to work for me. So I had to really search and find a place where I could feel hey, look, at the end of the day, this is about my family and where totally. I want to sit on that realm of fatherhood. And the company that I'm at now, when I had the interview, the one thing that I walked away from was they stopping me, and they're hey, look, we understand, we get it. And we think that that's the best thing that you could have done, is just say, hey, I'm a new father. Mm-hmm. I want to be home with my child, and that we respect that. So we're gonna, allow you to work from home, and, we want to hire you. And that was wow, thank you. That was for them to say, hey, look, we totally get it. And we want to work with you to work on that really made me want to work harder for them.
Exactly. So
that was really something that stood out to me from the very get-go of my interview, of having someone look out for me and what I'm trying to work towards. So,
exactly.
Yeah. And so that's, one of the things that came out of COVID for me, and just having that a part of my life. But one of the other things I'd love to just, now steer it towards more of where you are standing now and moving towards certain goals mm-hmm. from this platform and going forward, because I can imagine this runs the gamut of spreading wildfire.
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
And, more and more companies trying to do what you're doing, mm-hmm. which is show them and invest in themselves by investing in their employees.
Correct. Yep.
And so that is something that I've started to see even more on, just through social media mm-hmm. and through the idea of how do we make the best employees, and how do we give them what they are looking for? Yes. Can you give me some goals that you are setting for TeamLeadr for the end of the quarter mm-hmm. for this year, but mm-hmm. also for the next upcoming year, so that our listeners can help you out and maybe make it happen and come true?
No, I appreciate it. That's very nice of you. Thank you. And you worded, I don't remember how you worded it very articulately, but you basically said teaching or having, in companies learn how to invest in themselves by investing in their employees. I think that's such a beautiful way to word that because it's so true, right? So I love that sentiment. I might steal that. So
no problem. It's all yours.
I'm going to take that. I think that's a great way to word that. For my goals, so there's two thoughts here is, my background is in, healthcare. And so I, of course, have a passion for just helping people on their sickest, worst days. That will always be a huge part of me. But like I said before, about that example with the learner, the woman and her husband, their conflict at home, I intentionally kind of developed this program and kind of this whole platform so that it's not just focused on one industry or even a professional setting. Like I said, people can use this going to the grocery store or, eventually coaching a kid's team or whatever it may be.
Nice.
And so I call Team Leader industry agnostic, meaning we're really the fundamentals that we have, every industry can benefit from, leaders understanding how they, naturally want to lead people, what their natural traits and inclinations are, when faced with certain situations. Every industry can focus on how to manage a conflict between two or more people, again, whether in professional setting or a personal setting. Yeah. Every industry can understand how to have their leaders kind of lead with their company culture and using their culture as a catalyst to kind of guide their leadership styles. Yeah. These are all things that are included, in Team Leader. And those are all things that really don't have a home when it comes to just in an industry. Yeah. So to answer your question in a long-winded way, what I would love to really have is by the end of this quarter, have a diverse, have a handful of clients here in Arizona. Because again, as a native, I really want to invest in Arizona and keep leaders here and keep people here. Yeah. But I would love to have, a diverse portfolio of industries that are using this program and these methodologies. Right now I have 2 in Arizona, but they're both in healthcare, of course, because that's where my roots and my connections are. But that's where I would really love to focus this out and just show people again, leading, these are not complex things. These are things we've probably already heard, in a lot of ways. All I do is I just package it up in a nice, simple, easy to follow way. And I give you some really cool, quick, down and dirty acronyms and tips and trips. So when 2 employees are yelling at each other, or you've got a performance review that's not good and employees walking in the room right now and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm sweating bullets. Yeah. Just some quick, easy things that you can deploy right there in the moment to get the job done. Yeah. That's really all I'm trying to do here. Just give you some really quick, skills that you can pull out of your quiver whenever the time comes.
Nice. Well, again, I really do appreciate what you do because again, it's you are the person cheerleading for the companies and for the employees as well, more importantly. Yeah. But I'm the cheerleader for you. And I really do I love when it's someone who understands that these components that we live by are just kind of things that we want to provide and want to show off to or share with others. It's important. It makes a big effect. And so that's kind of the thing for me is I really want to put my best foot forward with everyone who comes in through our doors. And so any tips and tricks that you can give me or I can learn from you, I will definitely take. But on the flip side, but I really want you to be able to have these real moments of reflection when it comes to our podcast and think, hey, look, maybe down the road, you'll come back to us and share some stories with us. And that would be super cool because I'd love to kind of meet you again and down the road with, some more companies that, and, investors and things like that want to work with you because we have a slew of them, over 300. I'll give you that hopefully we'll be able to look at this episode and be like, hey, look, I would love a chance to meet you.
I appreciate that.
And so before we go, we do have the end portion here, which is for you to tell everyone where they can find you online. Sure. Anything and everything under the sun as far as, email, social media handles, anything like that you want to share with the people listening. The floor is yours.
Absolutely. There's so many. My PR agent will probably be like, no, you said it wrong. But we're on Instagram, team.leadr. We're on LinkedIn as well too. Team Leader, you can LEADR, no ER, just straight R. You can also find us all information you need at www.teamleadr.app. Or if you're on LinkedIn or anywhere, you feel free to just reach out to me directly at info.teamleadr.app. I'd love to talk with you.
Awesome. And before we go, we always have our little outro. You can catch every episode of Finding Arizona Podcast at our website, findingarizonapodcast.com. We make it easy for you guys to connect with us through social media, everything under Finding Arizona Podcast. And if you want to send us an email, findingarizonapodcast@gmail.com. And our little outro, always kisses, hugs, and belly rubs to our 4-legged friends. And we'll see you next time.